The American cult of romantic relationships has, like many other areas in this circle, almost everything wrong with it. The first thing is the premise. And the premise of romantic relationship is that it should just happen naturally. And that if there's something wrong with our romantic relationships, there must be something wrong with nature, since they're supposed to happen naturally. In fact, 1 in 3 domestic relationships contain domestic violence in one form or another. Almost all romantic relationships are abusive towards self, towards other, often mutually, to one degree or another. 25% or more of Americans have participated on one side or the other of sexual abuse. And if we expand the definition of abuse to be ill use, the percentages are much higher. And less than 1% of all romantic relationships are what we could call optimal. So the premise of things happening naturally leads to a lack of education, a lack of competency. We lack competency in communication. We lack competency in subcategories of not only not knowing when to speak and what to speak about, but how to listen, how to validate, how to celebrate, how to honor. We have a mistaken notion that sex is more important than any other aspect of a good romantic relationship, which is statistically absurd, because if you look at the number of minutes in a month of the average American relationship that is spent having sex, you will see less than 5% of all relational interactions are sexual in nature. What is much more significant are qualities of companionship, are the quality of communication. And if you step back a little bit from the focus on sexuality as the foundation of a romantic relationship, we could see that a good partnership might be defined as a partnership in which both people move consciously and reliably forward in a synergy, meaning where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because truly, if you could get there faster alone, it doesn't support the, the validity of a relationship. But every human being in the history of humanity needs to survive. And sadly, many romantic relationships decrease the ability to survive. So in a capitalist framework, we're talking about money as a core link to survival. And so whether it's having children that cost an average of $400,000 per, for the life of the child, the problems with single parenting and the 40% of divorces that occur, or potentially people losing their jobs or leaving their jobs to be in relationship, or you can see examples where particularly short-term sexual relationships interfere with the ability to, whether it's go to school or to get a job or to show up on time and get one's work done. Romantic relationships do not always increase the mutual survival and security, the second in the hierarchy of human needs. Love and belonging is a mixed bag because sex is neutral. Sex is an amplifier. It is not linked innately with love. And so sex can be a vendetta, a passive-aggressive form of punishment and withholding. It can be a variety of things other than love. And it can have nothing to do with belonging. In a chauvinistic culture, the highest arousal templates will often correlate to the masculine, be it male or female, the initiatory, assertive energy of the masculine, violating the more sensitive and responsive energy that is the feminine. And whether this is women seeking consciously or unconsciously to play out rape or BDSM fantasies, or whether it is men consciously or unconsciously seeking to play out rape or BDSM fantasies, the energy is typically one of masculine energy, the assertion, the initiatory, the focus, the strategy, being one of degradation, predation towards feminine energy, that which is more innocent, that which is more sensitive, that which is more emotional. And so when you have a culture that is founded on the devaluation of the planet and the environment, when you have a culture, the masculine, in a hostile relationship with its host body, with its feminine, when you have a predatory capitalist framework where the focus is to get as big and strong and as rich as possible for the purpose of dominating, of bullying, of exploiting that power to further gain more wealth, more money, more power, more rank. In that framework of deep cultural chauvinism, the sexual template mirrors the energetic template of the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And so the strongest and most intense energy will generally break down to masculine energy in a male or a female violating feminine energy. And so there is not an increased sense of love and belonging after such sexual intensity, but rather release and reenactment of an abuse template. There's also self-esteem is either built up or, in our culture, frequently damaged. Because, in part, a chauvinistic culture idealizes the independent, sociopathic, cool. That's what sociopathic is. I'm cool. I don't feel things. I don't need things. I don't want things. I'm cool. I'm a sociopath. The culture idealizes the masculine, assertive, independent, non-emotional, I'm cool persona. But relationships tend to bring out more feminine traits in at least one partner. And this creates a certain schizophrenia between the energy that's brought out in many relationships and the cult ideal. So one can actually feel self-hatred as an internalization of the culture hating the feminine in you, particularly if you're a male. And you start opening up into your feminine side inadvertently, despite all the cultural programming. And you start opening up into a more sensitive, more vulnerable, more feminine side, only to have that be treated abruptly, shamefully, dismissively by chauvinistic females in a chauvinistic cult. The male feels pain as their feminine side is violated by the dismissiveness of their partner, but when they turn around to fight, why are you hurting me? They're met with the cultural barrage of messages that says, the reason you're hurt is because you're a pussy. A derogatory term for men who are experiencing more femininity than is culturally sanctioned. And so there's, another breakdown at that level. Part of chauvinism also dictates not only that there should be a discrepancy, because we do know that training and competency works. Jet planes costing hundreds of millions of dollars require competent pilots to fly them. And jet planes do not have feelings, do not have hormones, do not have religious beliefs. Jet planes are a lot more reliable than human beings. When you press a button, usually the thing that happens before happens again. If you work with multiple jet planes of the same model, they don't just suddenly behave very differently. So there's a very good case to argue that jet planes are about 5 times easier to fly than to confidently and predictably create optimal relationships with another unique human being. Another unique human being who has feelings, who has a past, who has beliefs, who has traumatic memories, who has cross-wired definitions of love and abuse. And yet the pilot, that is admittedly flying a much simpler device than a human being, is given 6 years of competent training. And as a result, 99.999% of all planes that take off land successfully, get to the desired destination. 99% of all human relationships, by contrast, if they even get off the ground, do not arrive at the desired destination, which is normally not even discussed until you're in the air. In the paradigm of American relationships, you take off, normally with very little preamble. It's as simple as some sexual attraction. And then while you're flying at 20, 30,000 feet, you have an argument about where is the desired destination. And then you look and see if whether you have enough fuel to get there. And if you do, you don't know how to land the plane gracefully, so most relationships crash and burn for reasons other than death. The marriage paradigm is also problematic in the vows to "until death do us part." And partly we have a schizophrenia around the pursuit of happiness. It's built into the Constitution. And the actual reality that if you are with someone in a comatose state, if you are with someone who is paralyzed, if you are with someone who has been traumatized or who becomes an addict, sticking with this person who you may rapidly grow to hate in the intersection of incompetence and pain and helplessness. So this is a good recipe for hate, not mentioned in an emotionally illiterate culture, but pain, helplessness, and incompetence. You don't know what you're doing, you don't know where to get help, and you're in pain. The person around that energy is going to become a subject of hate the vast majority of the time, because that is the sensation that when we say, I hate this, what we're hating is a feeling of helplessness, is a feeling of overwhelm and not knowing what to do, is a feeling of pain. That's what that word is for. I don't want to be here. Well, if another person's situation is bringing us into focus or into context with our helplessness, with our pain, with our own incompetence. We will hate them, ourselves, the situation, anyone who's not helping us do something, because that's a sensation the body is designed to produce to tell us something's not working right. And the marriage vow does not provide an answer to this situation, which is why so many marriages break up. As the marriage plunges people into domains in which they are incompetent, in pain, and feel helpless to do anything about it, and uncertain in the future, they naturally do whatever they have to do to get out of that situation, which is normally to walk out of a relationship. We can also look at the stages of relationship as being faulty, because when you're courting someone, at least in an ideal relationship, you are entering the relationship mutually. So I want to go on a date with you. Do you agree to go on a date with me? Well, the other person has to say yes. And then you say, well, where shall we meet? And the other person has to participate in a location. So the beginning of relationship is mutual. The middle of relationship often becomes less mutual. Usually, in an untrained populace, whoever is the dominant person, which in a chauvinistic culture will be the person who's most masculine, the person who talks the most, who starts things the most, who recommends things the most, this person will start to dominate the relationship. Now, if you have two highly masculine people in a chauvinistic paradigm, there will just be endless conflict and competition as both people try to talk and nobody wants to listen, as both people try to get their idea to work and don't want to do the other's ideas, as both people say, let's do it this way, and the other person says, no, let's do it this way. So if you have two masculine people in a chauvinistic paradigm, you have conflict and you have very little chemistry. However, in a chauvinistic paradigm where the masculine has a template of violation, the person who is the masculine identity in the relationship shows an insensitivity, shows a disrespect, shows a dishonor, and an unhealthy dominance, using their ideas, their initiatory, to create a relationship that is good for them, but is not necessarily good for their partner. And so you have more of an exploitive relationship on a template of chauvinism. So it's not as participatory. It's more, come on, let's do this my way, and then the person says, okay. It's not a balanced, what's best for you, what's best for me, let's meet in the middle. It's not a let's take turns being masculine and feminine. That takes a little bit more sophistication than the majority of people are capable with zero relational training in an education protocol that willfully ignores the need to learn not only about physical sexuality, but the psychology of sexuality, the neutrality of sexuality, when sex is beneficial and when it is destructive, the need to learn communication protocols, the need to learn negotiation, listening, speaking, the need to know what questions to ask. In the American cult, one can go from cradle to grave without a single individual in the entire lifespan asking very vital questions to any healthy relationship. What would make you feel 100% loved and supported? Write a list. Write this down. I'm 45 years old, and no individual, male or female, parent or lover, friend, has ever volunteered that question. It's the most important question to ask. If you want to begin to move towards win-win, you need to have answers to that for both people. What would have to happen? What would I need to do to make you feel 100% loved and supported? What does that look like? At a physical level, at a verbal level, at a financial level, at an emotional level, as a mental level. And because one can go cradle to grave without ever being asked this question once, when the question is sprung, meaning I've asked this question to dozens and dozens of women in the context of lover relationships, most of them have no idea how to answer it because no one has ever asked them in the history of their child-parent relationship, school relationship, friendships, and multiple romantic relationships. The most basic question, what does love look like for you in this situation, is not asked, is not answered, and is not volunteered. This is a profoundly reactive and dysfunctional system. So on the level of proactive, reactive, and apathy, a large percentage of our population, a majority of our population, is dealing with reactivity or apathy rather than vision and proactive responsibility. So so on that metric we have low grade, low quality templates for engaging. Then we have the issue of the maturation process of love. Every infant in the history of humanity needs, I need you, needs a secure attachment. Now there's two problems here. One, this is a child relating to a parent. So there is a lot of I need you in our culture. However, the culture is shaming this position. So there's a lot of I need you, particularly in early stages of romance. And the culture is shaming this position. So there's two problems. First of all, we're dealing with a child level of love. And the second is that shaming a child doesn't work. And the third is that we produce a lot of insecure attachment trauma in the culture, in the child-parent template. For example, I do not have a secure emotional attachment and never did with either of my parents. So this makes it harder to develop a sense of secure attachment, which leads to arrested development in the child stage of love. For a child, for a pet, love is I need you. It's all about me. The trouble with a culture that produces so many regressed children in the romantic state is two children are not capable of taking care of one another. When you have traumatized, regressed children who didn't get their need for secure emotional attachment from either or one or both parents, the natural arrest point in that development of love is I need you. I need you to be like this. I need you to be like that. I need you to do this. I need you to be the parent that I didn't have. I need you to protect me. I need you to make me feel better. I need you to make me feel safe. I need you to be what I didn't get before. So the problem in parenting becomes the problem in romantic relationship, but it becomes exponentially bigger when the response of the partner is not, okay, let's see how I can meet your needs. Because if you are arrested in a childlike state emotionally, it means you need parenting that you didn't get as a child. Well, where's that going to come from? You can learn to parent yourself, except our culture doesn't teach that. It teaches you how to shame, neglect, and abandon yourself. It doesn't teach you about inner ages, for example. It doesn't teach you about the traumatic arrest process that would help you understand why you're stuck emotionally at 6 years old. My father was a petulant, vengeful, terrified 6-year-old at an emotional level. Since the traumatic physical and psychological abuse of his father and mother shook him up and froze him as a terrified 6-year-old, and his body developed. But if you wanted to have a relationship emotionally, he didn't know how to do it because he was 6 years old. Well, our culture creates a systemic blind spot in this point. So, a terrified, vengeful 6-year-old, what does he want revenge for? He wants revenge that rather than being loved and nurtured by either parent, he's caustically humiliated by an alcoholic mother, and he's violently beaten and shamed by a father with PTSD induced by our government's military in World War II. So he wants to actually be loved as a human being, and he's not getting it. And when he's crying, when he's heartbroken about that, he's being shamed, he's being hit, he's being humiliated. You think that produces feelings of hurt, hate, helplessness, and petulant revenge? Well, just look at the evidence. He spent the rest of his life punishing people in direct proportion to their proximity. Well, kids are very close to their parents, so they're going to be punished. Well, this is how intergenerational abuse occurs. So you have a grandfather abused by their government, let alone whatever intergenerational cycles before. You have the grandfather abusing the father. You have the father abusing the child, which creates a child with, surprise, arrested emotional development, fear, terror, neediness. Well, we have a culture that shames people and calls them not real men for being terrified and needy. We have an entire generation of women who are cruel, sarcastic, hostile, and punishing towards scared, needy males, having experienced the same abuse protocol being directed to them as little girls, teased for their femininity, teased for their feelings, humiliated, exploited, violated, raped, molested, and then told to grow up. And they do grow up into bodies as vengeful teenagers who hate their own femininity in a chauvinistic cult. So you have a lot of problems that produce two needy children, and you put two 6-year-olds who desperately need love together, and they will tear the shit out of each other because they haven't experienced a competent adult. They don't know what love is. But they both need it. Every human being needs love. They just don't have a reference point, so they're clawing for something in short supply. And you see this in the cruelty of American children in kindergarten, middle school, high school, and college. The viciousness, the competitiveness. And we don't even know what to go for. So we have a gap between biology and modern day culture because people are still attracted to symmetry for genetic reproduction purposes. A symmetrical face will be far more attractive than a non-symmetrical face. and this is instinctively tested in the laboratory, white faces are more attractive to black people and white people at a semi-conscious level. If you look at the physiology, not the conscious mind, of both white and black people, racism, through hundreds of years of abusive programming, has permeated both whites and blacks in America. So you have institutionalized instinctual racism. This racism is amplified by a mythology which elevates the white over the black. So you can't say that white is good and black is evil, light is good and dark is evil, as the ultimate paradigm for all rightness and badness and guidance and morality and all that, and all beauty. Beauty is to be white and clean and all of this stuff. You can't brainwash an entire culture with this message over and over again and then expect them to be attracted to black, or to not somehow feel that black is worse than white as a color, as a race, as an idea, because the mythology is polluted with an asymmetrical pattern, meaning the rainbow colors, if you look at a prism and look at the intersection of black and white, all of the colors come equally out of the black and the white. You cannot make a scientific supposition that black is inferior or superior than white. You cannot make a scientific supposition or a mathematical supposition that says that either side of a polarity of something like black or white, acid or alkaline, too heavy or too light, heat. You can't say that one side of any polarity is better than the other. Yin and yang, masculine and feminine, male or female. It's a mathematical absurdity to try and prove these asymmetries. But we do it culturally by ignoring the science and ignoring the math. We ignore science and math constantly in feminine terrain such as relationships. So right after child love, you have adolescent love. I want. I need you. That's the child. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not competent of doing anything more than narcissistic love. I want you. Nothing wrong with it. I want to fuck you. I want this. I want that. I want this. I want you. Adolescent love. Young adult love. No one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to be my own person, this and that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be this. It's all about... So child, adolescent, and young adulthood are all self-centered. It's all about me. The trouble is, you cannot have a sustainable, healthy relationship unless at least one person is an adult. The adult is the very first stage of love development that is about the other person. The adult begins by looking at how to love the self. I need you. Okay, how can I meet that need? I want this. How can we meet those desires? I want to explore. I want to be free. How can we do that? The adult first learns the art of self-love, of fulfilling these different drives in early development. The adult then turns outward and says, how can I love you? What does it mean? I feel love. Do I love enough to care? If you don't love enough to care, I just feel love. I don't care about you, but I just feel love. It's a very young love. So I love enough to care. It's a start. Do I care enough to see you? We're looking at respect here. Respect, to see and see again. Do I care enough to see you? I don't know. I care about you, but I'm too busy. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to learn about this. I'm never going to ask you once in our relationship, not once, what would make you feel completely and totally loved and supported. I don't want to see that, because that's about you, and I'm about me, right? So seeing is adult love. And then we have, do I see you enough to understand you? Okay, I heard you cut yourself. You hate this, but you don't like this. I see it. But do you understand it? Do you understand why highly traumatized children feel a release of terror and a sense of control when they cut themselves? Do you understand that? No. Okay. So you don't love enough to understand. You don't see enough to understand. So are you going to acknowledge that as immature love, or are you going to blame it on other people? So in a psychologically illiterate cult that does not love enough to see enough to understand, you just call all these anomalous people weird. That's weird, that's weird, that's weird, that's weird. It's not my job to become an adult. It's not my job to learn to love enough to see enough to understand. No. I just call that all weird and remain willfully ignorant in my stupidity and do exactly what I would have done before. So if I understand, I see. So this terrifying anxiety comes up. And you feel all alone, and you feel helpless. And there's a way that cutting your own skin gives you a sense of control and lifts the sense of helplessness and distracts you from the inner anxiety that the cult has not prepared you to deal with, and lets you focus on outer pain, which you know how to deal with. You can put a Band-Aid on. You know exactly what you're doing when you cut yourself. But you don't know what you're doing in an anxiety attack, because this cult is psychologically illiterate. It knows nothing about the science of anxiety. We are more ignorant at a pathological level than many of our Greek ancestors, who actually focused on self-awareness as basic education. We don't have it. We have iPhone awareness, but we don't have self-awareness. And so we're transferring a pain from an area we feel helpless and terrified and out of control to an area where I have control. I've got the knife. And it's a pain that I know I understand it, and I know how to feel it, and I want my attention there rather than in here in a domain that I don't understand. So, okay, so I see you enough to understand you. Do you really? You see, we're looking at a maturation process of love. Do I love you enough to let understanding unfold into empathy? It's like a flower blooming. Loving enough to care, caring enough to see, seeing enough to understand, understanding enough to empathize. Wow, that's what it's like to be you. My goodness, that's terrifying, that's painful, that's lonely. Wow, I care about you. Do I love you enough to empathize with what I've taken the time and skill to understand? Now, this is not something that can be done as an isolated individual, which is why we are cursed by the incompetence of the cult. You can't understand something like, why does my best friend cut themselves, without reading a book like The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. You can't, there's no way to get that unless you look at the psychological and statistical data and the paradigms for understanding that. So it actually takes time. And someone in the billions of people has to have written a book about it. And you've got to actually care, not just enough to say, I care, but you've actually got to care enough to find the data, to find the consciousness, the paradigms that work in the domain that you're trying to understand about yourself and about another person. Well, most people don't even love themselves enough to understand themselves, so they certainly can't understand someone else. And when they understand themselves to the degree they say, they say, I'm weird. I'm a mutant. We understand enough to shame ourselves, not to empathize with ourselves. Shame is not being loving. Abuse is not love. So do I understand enough to empathize? Now, this is as natural as possible. When you fully understand how and why and where and when a pattern emerged in someone that you're expressing interest in. Empathy is natural. You've got mirror neurons, but it takes care, the care enough to see, the effort to see enough to understand, the willingness to feel in response to what you understand. This leads to empathy. But okay, so I care about you, I see you, I understand that you're feeling terrified here and this and that and the other. Okay. Do I empathize enough to change? Do I understand that you have bad dreams every time I do this? Okay, I understand that. And I'm sorry you have bad dreams, but I'm not going to alter my behavior. I'm my own person. I'm a young adult, right? That's the young adult stage. No one's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do my own thing. You can't control me. Do I empathize enough to attune, to change, to say, I'm driving a bit fast for your comfort zone. And it matters to me that you're at a 7 in anxiety being in the passenger seat in my car. I care enough to empathize. I empathize enough to change. You know what? I am a reckless driver. I probably would be nervous if I didn't have control of the wheel. You don't have control of the wheel. What would it take? What do I need to do so that your anxiety goes down to a 2 or less? I understand being in the car with me is not an entirely risk-free environment, but let's bring the 7 down to a 2. Do I empathize enough to attune? And to the adolescent and the young adult, this is violation of sovereignty. You mean you're letting, particularly for the chauvinism of men, you're letting a woman decide how fast you drive in your own car? This is outrageous. Because an adolescent or a young adult is focused on me being me without anyone interfering with whatever it is that I've decided is me. Doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad, doesn't matter if I'm risking my own life. It's me. And no one's going to tell me not to be me. And I'm certainly not going to make any changes for anyone. Well, it's a great recipe for isolation. It's a great demonstration of the sociopathic mindset. You don't matter, I do. But it's not love. Love is attuning. We're talking about adult love. Attunement. To make a change for you. How is it now? How's this now? Okay. Or, I'm sorry, I can't love you in this situation. I haven't learned to be a young adult yet. I haven't found myself. I haven't found out who I would like to be before I know what I'm attuning to. I knew what mom and dad needed, and then I knew what my teacher needed, and now I know what you need, but I've never gone from I need you and I want you through the young adult period of this is me and no one's going to change it. You need to go through that stage. You need to have a few years of being a young adult so that you know what your starting point is. So that you can say, I I really like driving fast. I've invested $200,000 in sports cars that allow me to drive fast. And I understand that you don't want to drive over 60 miles an hour, and you don't want to cut curves, and you feel nauseous. So here's what we're going to do. Sometimes I'm going to drive alone, and sometimes we're going to meet in the middle, and you can be a 5 out of 10 uncomfortable, and I can be a 5 out of 10 annoyed at slowing down, and we'll have some meeting points that we understand are not optimal, but they may be better than, for example, taking 2 separate cars on a road trip and spending the money and not being apart, and because we like the picnics together and we like this and we like the conversation. Our driving styles are different, so we're going to meet in the middle sometimes. Sometimes we're going to go alone, but I know who I am, and I want to know who you are, and then let's attune to both of us. It's not one of giving up, and it's not one of dominating. It's here I am and here you are. This is optimal. Do we do our optimal thing alone? Some of the time, all of the time? Are we a good match? And what would meeting in the middle look like? Because meeting in the middle is not doing it all your way all the time. And it's not doing it all my way all the time, which is part of the problem with the dominant personality and the chauvinistic template. Often what happens is the masculine persona in the relationship, be it male or female, you have bossy masculine women, you have bossy masculine men, will shove the compromise and bully the other person to a point where either they cling to the relationship out of fear because they're a child hoping they'll get loved if they give the parent everything that they need, or they leave the relationship because they don't want to fight and their partner is too insensitive. So these are all problems. Now, if you attune enough, if you love enough to attune, do you attune enough to succeed? And this brings in, what an optimal relationship might look like. Do you attune enough to succeed at facilitating the survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, sense of safety, sense of pleasure, the development of the gifts in your partner, the bringing of those gifts into the world, and the becoming a part of something bigger than self? These are the hierarchy of human needs. To love someone like as an adult is to love enough to care enough to see enough to understand, etc., so as to facilitate at the beginning the fulfillment, the acceleration of human needs that every human being has. Because if you are damaging someone's needs or not helping them meet their needs, it's not love. It may be me, I need you. It may be I want you. Maybe I'm doing my own thing. That's fine. The child, adolescent, and young adult all have their place. But it's not adult love. And you are not capable of having a partnership of adult love until at least one person in the relationship is an adult, capable of adult love. Now, why at least one? Well, if one person is an adult and the other person is a child, I need you, the adolescent, I want you. An adult can parent another child, another adolescent. An adult can take care of themselves, have healthy boundaries, and nurture their child, their adolescent lover. I'm talking about the inner child, the inner adolescent, because you can be 65 years old and be a complete 6-year-old around neediness and a complete 15-year-old around lust, and I've got to have more and this, and you can be a complete young adult of I've got to do it all my way and without any compromise, and don't smother me. And so you can be a child, an adolescent, a young adult. And you can be loved by an adult. The adult is the only person capable of loving. And they will, in effect, be your parent until you grow up. And if they love you successfully, and choose to love you successfully. It's okay, I am willing to be a parent until you are an adult. Well, you're going to deal with rebellion from the adolescent, in this part of this process. It's easy to go into martyrhood around all of this. But, if you really need me. How old are you right now? What's going on? What memories are you having around this? Okay, let's go in there. Let me teach you how to be an adult. A therapist, of course, can help with this. But so can a partner, so can a friend. Let's go in there. You're 6 years old. What's happening that's so terrifying that you've been insecure ever since at 6 years old? Would you like to be held? Oh, yes, I'd like to be held. I'd like to be nurtured. I'm 6 years old. I'm terrified. This memory comes. I don't want to face it. And then the child and the adolescent judge comes in, because we are a highly abusive, judgmental culture. The judge comes in. You helpless moron. I hate you. You make me look weak, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't love the child when you're busy blaming and shaming them for your own stupidity. When you're copying the cult's ignorance and passing that on, you can't do anything to love the child there. So, are you willing to love the child as an adult in your partner? And is your partner willing to learn to be an adult? Because if they just want to be a child forever and have someone take care of them and blah, 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 well, you may not want to be a parent for such a person, forever. But it's normal in an abuse cult like our own for at least one person to be stuck at a young age, and for both people to be stuck at a young age from time to time. And it's important to know how to reparent the self and reparent your partner. But this is just basic love. This is just going to the point where you can have the possibility of winning. Two people who need can't win. Two people who want can't win. And and the best you can do if you're stuck in child and adolescent is find someone who needs you the same way that you need them. That's a good start. You've got symmetry then. Now, if you're luck out in the compatibility or do a good job filtering, then you'll both need similar things and meet those needs as the child simultaneously. And if you both are drawn to the same sexuality of desire, I want you and this, then you can meet those needs together. It's very unlikely and unusual to have two young adults in the young adult state, each desperately needing to be themselves, and have that bring proximity. They kind of admire each other from a distance. Well, you're being yourself. Oh, that's so cool. I'm being myself over here. But you can't really come together. There's a time of a certain amount of space to discover what self is. And then one day, if you keep growing and learning to love and parent yourself, etc., you will be an adult. You will be the one who looks out and says, how can I love you? How can I be in service to you realizing your potential? Just because it's fun. I don't need you. I don't want you. I don't need to prove who I am. But I look at you, and I would enjoy seeing you grow in some way. I'd like to. Do you need mentoring to grow your business? Do you need this? Do you need that? It would be fun to see you grow as a human being and to participate in the maturing of the cult. Because the possibility field in the intelligence level of a cult of self-actualized adults, we're talking hundreds of times more value, more well-being, more safety, more security, we're talking orders of magnitude in improved well-being, sustainability, and intelligence. Because we've mastered the art of spreading the virus of adulthood. Because here's how the virus spreads. Once you become an adult and you love someone enough to care enough to see enough to understand enough to empathize enough to attune enough to succeed. It's not just, I'm going to make this change because I know what's best for you. You make a change and you say, how's this? And you watch. And you see if the person is divided. If they say that's terrible, but they're smiling broadly, you say, oh, so you've got a cult brain that's telling you this is dumb and stupid, but your body really likes it. You're split. This is obviously a difficult person to love. When their mind says this is stupid and their body says this is great. When their heart says yes and their mind says no. Integration is of course part of being an adult as well, and lovability is bringing the heart, mind, and body, the different ages, etc., the together, so that it is possible. So that when you say, "Would you like to come with me?" you don't say yes, no. Your body says yes, your heart says no, your mind says I have no idea. You can't dance. Will you dance left with me? Yes, no, I don't know. Will you dance right with me? Yes, no, I don't know. You're not even lovable on a technical level because you haven't learned to love yourself. In a cult that is willfully ignorant of these topics. So every single level of the romantic kind of template of our cult is either suboptimal or diametrically opposed to well-being. So we've got the idea that it just happens naturally. We've got the idea that sex is the be-all and end-all and should be the reason. Like if your sex is hotter with this person who's a coke addict and steals from you, and that's all that matters. I mean, that if this very mature and lovely friend and companion, who's supporting your growing and here and there, doesn't have a breasts of a certain size, that, oh my goodness, So this is the difference between an adolescent and an adult. For an adolescent, the sex is, of course, everything, because they're just discovering this I want. But on the other side of realizing, that need, there are other things, so then there's the tremendous absence of training, which is institutionalized in education. Then there's the idea in the United States, we call ourselves a capitalist cult. We don't say we're a relational cult. We don't say we're a human cult. There were the communists that focused on the communal as at least the supposed value. But we were the ones that said money. And in most cases, if you offer an American $1 million or a potentially great relationship, they'll take the $1 million. The $1 million is just paper. Many people, if given $1 million, will feel worse, and this has been shown with lottery winnings. Many lottery winners have ruined their lives as a result of being given money, but they'll still take it, which is a symptom of ignorance. When the data says that a large number of people have had their lives ruined by turning left and have had their lives improved by turning right, and you say, what would you like to do? And they say, turn left. You're demonstrating a symptom of ignorance. This cult values money more than it values the people who made the money, which is a mathematical error. You cannot come up with an equation that justifies that value hierarchy, but we ignore the mathematics to our peril. In many ways, we can see our cult as a lure onto the rocks, that if you do what's normal and follow the beacon, the promise of the cult, that, much like the shipwreckers in the 18th century, who would fake the location of the rocks with lights on the beach in storms so that they could wreck the ship and steal the loot. Our cults, our cultures, are false lighthouses, promising that if you will just sacrifice your integrity and everything to make a lot of money, you will be happy. That if you just buy enough items, you'll be happy. That if you use this aftershave, you will stop feeling shame from your childhood trauma. That if you do this and this, and the cult is a lie. The cult is a lie in this and so many areas. So we have the deprioritization of relationship, which is a very significant and important part of love and belonging. As a cult, certainly in America, one of the wealthiest cultures in terms of consumption, meaning an American consumes more energy in the form of natural resources and money per capita than any cult in human history. And an American will leave 102 tons of garbage in a landfill by the time they're dead from the waste generated from that consumption. So we're consuming more natural resources than is sustainable or than any cult in human history, but we have not reached love and belonging as a cult. Love, and many of us are not secure despite massive consumption. And we have not realized love and belonging or self-esteem at a high level as a cult. And relationships offer the best accelerated journey to do both if done competently. But in the hierarchy, a new romantic relationship will often come fifth or fourth in the American lifestyle. First, I'm going to do my job, take it or leave it, I don't care what it is, and I'm going to spend 80% of all my life energy on my job, preparing for it, driving to it, driving from. I'm going to put my job ahead of my relationship. I'm going to put my hobbies ahead of the relationship. I'm going to put my TV and media consumption and my phone ahead of my relationship. I might put my family or whatever ahead of my relationship. If I have an addiction, 1 in 7 Americans is an addict, that goes ahead of my relationship. Every single addict is loyal to their addiction ahead of their partner. And so you come in fifth. You come in fifth with a regressed, abused, traumatized, emotionally illiterate human being who has no relational training or very little, who may be cross-wired in the definition of love and abuse. And you're going to put them fifth with this paradigm that this wonderful optimal relationship, that 2 regressed children are just going to learn to love and meet each other's needs, that 2 adolescents who want different things are going to, as adolescents, surrender their lust to actually put a mature love and relationship first. Adolescents don't do that. Adolescents say, oh, that one looks juicy over there. That one, I've got to go and do that. You're in the way. Get out of the way. I'm going to go do this. And then suddenly the child and the other person feels insecure, and that's the end of the relationship, and so there's not really that much that we're doing right. The cult's chauvinism is going to say, oh, this is no big deal because these are just relationships. What really matters is money. What really matters is how many people you boss around at work or whatever it is. 77% of Americans are not very satisfied with their job, but who cares? We're going to put this unsatisfactory expression of mediocrity ahead of all other things, rather than building a life around a partnership, around the mature love to love enough to see enough to attune enough to fulfill and develop both of your hierarchy of human needs, to become more, to, as a couple, form a synergy that accelerates your self-actualization and your contribution of value to something bigger than self, which is a human need. Once one has developed survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, one's personal talents and gifts, and integrated those into the world, which creates abundance. Once you reach that point, every human being reaches for something bigger than themselves. How can we help the community? How can we help our family? How can we respond to the hurricane? How can we improve our ecology? What can we invest in the future? Every human being who is rich in the lower needs becomes a contributor to the larger ecosphere of which we are a part. And the future of our species is determined by how successfully we reach and support something bigger than ourselves.